There's an evergreen maxim in Hollywood that you're only as good as your next picture. In the summer of 1942, Billy Wilder had just wrapped The Major and the Minor, the first movie he directed in Hollywood, and it had gone well. He was within a stone's throw of the budget, more or less on time, and despite Paramount studio heads predicting or even hoping for a rocky production, Wilder ran a steady set. Now came the trickiest part of making his first movie, making his second.
Or maybe that maxim is more true today than it was then. These days, we're accustomed to years-long gaps between projects from our favorite directors. They need to raise money from multiple backers, or fight their way onto a studio's restrictive release schedule, or sell their souls to a streamer. But back in the old studio system, the infrastructure was different. If they directed a movie and the production went well, and if the studio was happy, they'd roll right into their next picture.
In today's episode of the Filmographers podcast, we're going to discuss Wilder's second film, Five Graves To Cairo, which he started working on before The Major and the Minor was even released. And yet, despite not knowing how his first movie would be received, the ever-shrewd Wilder wasn't just looking to make a successful follow-up. He was looking to make a movie that would help define the character of his career. Keir, if someone's coming to Chicago, what's one place they have to visit?
Mike, no one should leave town without stopping by Exile in Bookville, the city's most beautiful and carefully curated bookstore. It's located on the second floor of the historic Fine Arts Building at 410 South Michigan Avenue.
Hey, didn't you write a book about the Fine Arts Building?
Why, yes, I did. It's called Chicago's Fine Arts Building, Music, Magic, and Murder, and you can find it at Exile.
Exile is the best. Wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling books, all lovingly selected by owners Javier and Kristen Ramirez. I guarantee you'll find something to read. Their recommendations are always on point.
Their strong suit may be general and literary fiction, but I particularly love the middle room. That's where I find graphic novels as well as books about art and music, cooking and cocktails, and our personal favorite, books about movies.
Javier and Kristen were kind enough to let the Filmographers recommend our favorites, so stop by and see what we selected.
I wrote a shelf talker for one of my all-time favorites, Kyle Buchanan's Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, the wild and true story of Mad Max Fury Road.
They also stocked one of my faves, Sam Wasson's The Big Goodbye, Chinatown, and the Last Years of Hollywood.
Exile also has nonfiction, short stories, small press titles, and the very best in modern horror.
Listeners, if you're coming to Chicago, don't leave without visiting Exile in Bookville in the Fine Arts Building at 410 South Michigan Avenue. But you don't have to come to Chicago. You can find all they have to offer at exileinbookville.com.
That's exileinbookville.com, because there's more to life than movies. There are also books.
About movies. Keir, some real talk here. Had you ever seen Five Graves to Cairo before we started looking at Billy Wilder as the subject of our second season?
Mike, our listeners count on us to be truthful, and so I must admit that not only had I not seen this movie before, I had never even heard of it. When I did scrutinize his IMDb, however, I was intrigued because it has one hell of a title. I'm guessing many of our listeners are also unfamiliar with it, so please kick us off with your one-sentence summary.
All right, I got to shake up some rust here. It just dawned on me, Keir. I haven't done this since I don't remember what episode of the Soderbergh season was, so it's been a while. So
it's been months, but I'm convinced you've got this.
We'll find out. All right, here it goes. Five Graves to Cairo. One sentence. Okay. The lone survivor of a slaughtered British tank division stumbles into an Egyptian outpost, only to find it occupied by the Nazis and Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, whose strategy regarding a supply line to Cairo, if leaked, might just turn the tide of the war in Africa. There it is.
Well done, Mike. You still got it.
Still got it. All right. So the movie stars Francho Tone as Captain John Bramble, Ann Baxter as Moosh, Akeem Tamaroff as Farid, and Eric von Stroheim as Rommel himself. And I should note, I actually have seen this movie before, and I'll share my thoughts on it. We both will later on in the episode. I'd seen it. It's kind of interesting. I'd seen it because, one of my hobbies, Keir, I think you share this hobby, is to watch movies recommended by directors we love. We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't. If we weren't obsessives. And Five Graves to Cairo, I don't know if you knew this, Five Graves to Cairo is actually included on Quentin Tarantino's list of his 10 favorite movies. It's number 10, sitting just above Jaws, which received an honorable 11th spot mention. But prior to that, like you, I'd never heard of nor seen this movie. And I'm guessing most people are probably in the same boat.
Yeah, it's a curious movie that has been overshadowed by Wilder's other towering achievements. But as we've already found with The Major and the Minor, even his films that have been largely overlooked can be well worthwhile. It's also a movie that Wilder wasn't even supposed to make. After The Major and the Minor's smooth production, which you pointed out earlier, Wilder and his co-writer Charles Brackett were in the good graces of the Paramount bigwigs and were promptly assigned their next project, which was not a war picture. It was a comedy about a traveling saleswoman titled Women's Wear. Little is known about why Women's Wear, which was eventually retitled Traveling Saleswoman, never got off the ground. According to Ed Sykov in his book On Sunset Boulevard, Paramount was unable to put the right cast together. And then, as now, no star power tends to mean no movie. But there's an interesting side story to this, one involving Bertolt Brecht, an important playwright from Weimar, Berlin, who, like Wilder, had fled to Southern California.
Yeah, according to legend, Brecht claimed that he had developed a story idea involving hypnotism and political radicalism with producer Paul Zinner. Now, Zinner, who worked as an assistant on The Major and the Minor, supposedly took the idea to Wilder, and together they began to develop the story. Brecht even claims to have been paid $35,000 just for his idea. Somewhere along the way, Brecht's relationship with Wilder fell apart, and Brecht even accused Wilder of stealing his idea. He wrote a poem about it called Shame.
Oh.
Yeah, there's something on his nose. It's this poem. Here's an excerpt from it. When I was robbed in Los Angeles, the city of merchandisable dreams, I noticed how I kept the theft performed by a refugee like me.
Heavy, man, and very German. Brecht's claim, from what we can tell, is dubious at best. I mean, first of all, $35,000 for a mere story idea is an outrageous amount. That's more than Wilder got paid to write and direct The Major and the Minor. And if Wilder did steal Brecht's idea, he never put any of the known details into his movies, so it's hard to see what exactly was stolen. Furthermore, Wilder and Brackett were, at this time, a rock-solid team, and they were under contract at Paramount as a team. It's hard to imagine Wilder either being able to maneuver around Brackett or, given their success, wanting to.
Without his alleged Brecht project and with Traveling Saleswoman having fallen apart, Wilder pivoted elsewhere. He turned to the burgeoning war happening across the ocean, rooted in the country he had recently left behind.
The studios are now copying more successful pictures. In other words, if there is a Godzilla, there is going to be a Jurassic Park. If there is a Stallone picture, in this background there's going to be a Stallone picture. Other background, they love number twos, number threes, number fours of pictures because they already know what the theme, as they would say, is, and it's going to be just a continuation of that thing. But if you bring them a story that is totally original, right? They say, this is very interesting, but I've never seen it before. He said that this is why I would like to make it, because you never seen it before. But how do we know that this is going to be successful? No, look, there's so many nice things, but I'm not familiar with that. I would have sleepless nights, because it's going to be a $30 million picture, and it's never been tried before.
Before we go further into Five Graves to Cairo, I want to take a brief pause and remind everyone how critical ratings and reviews are to us here at the Filmographers podcast. They help us reach new audiences, and quite frankly, it feels nice to hear people say that they're enjoying the show.
It does feel nice, doesn't it? Our good friend Daniel wrote to say, great first episode, learned a ton, and the production is even better this time. Love the inserted film clips and jokes. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Kevin, for making the production so professional. Although we are learning that the film clips, even the brief ones used in a critical context, which we would normally consider fair use, are not considered fair use by YouTube. But we will continue to share as much archival material as we can.
Yes, we absolutely will. And also, in addition to reviews and ratings, don't forget to become a member of our Patreon. This month, we'll be hosting our first book club, which is very exciting. We're going to discuss the similarities and differences between the film adaptation of Double Indemnity and its source material, the great James N. Cain novel. You won't want to miss it, and if you're part of our Patreon community, you won't have to. Even better, by contributing just a small monthly amount, you can receive all of our episodes ad-free and qualify for some filmographer swag like a coffee mug or a sticker. Join us at patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. That is patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. I'm sorry, also, before I go, geez, Keir, I almost skipped an important part. Thank you to our nudist, hopefully not.
They could be nudist, but we can't see them, so we don't know.
We don't know. And you know what? For everyone listening, watching, you can enjoy the Filmographers however you'd like. We don't discriminate. Even people who have verbal gaffes like me. Go ahead.
We just want you to be comfortable.
Exactly. But thank you to our newest Patreon supporters, Jack, Scott, and Liz. We appreciate it. Thank you for your generosity and kindness. Thank you for being part of our community. We're going to have a lot of fun this month with the Double Indemnity Book Club. Can't wait.
In our episode on The Major and the Minor, we discussed how thoughtful Wilder was about choosing his first film to direct. He knew studio execs saw him as a writer, not a director, and wanted to keep him at his typewriter. He also knew people, including his writing partner, Charles Brackett, believed he was too volatile to run a movie set. The stakes were high, and Wilder understood that his first movie had to be a success in every possible way, or his first would also be his last. So he didn't take any risks with the material. He chose a comedy that was as sweet as it was safe, and he behaved like a professional while he shot it.
Coming off of The Major and the Minor's successful production, and bear in mind, it hadn't even been released yet and was yet to also become a box office success, Wilder also knew that in order for his career to flourish, he needed to diversify. According to Psychov, Wilder didn't even want to make Traveling Saleswoman. He believed that making back-to-back light comedies would have put him in a box. And once you're in a box and known as a certain type of director, it's hard to get out. There's another danger too, because if you only make one type of movie and that one type of movie goes out of style, well, you're no longer a working director.
Wilder wanted to stretch his legs and prove his abilities. Now that he'd proved he wasn't just a screenwriter, he wanted to show he could do more than fluffy comedies. He could do action, he could do war, and he could do it at a bigger scale.
Wilder and Brackett were assigned to Five Graves to Cairo on August 10th, just 1 month before The Major and the Minor's release. The movie is based on Lajos Biro's play Hotel Imperial, but Wilder and Brackett weren't the first ones to have a crack at this material.
No, they were not. The movie had already been produced twice by Paramount and was even slated to be produced a third time in 1936 by, of all people, Wilder's friend and mentor Ernst Lubitsch. That version was going to star Marlene Dietrich, but she backed out. And then there were more casting issues, and the project never got off the ground. It was resuscitated again in 1939, this time with another Wilder familiar, Ray Milland, who played the lead. That movie, directed by Robert Florey, not Ernst Lubitsch, bombed. But if there's one thing Hollywood has always loved, it's a remake. And Paramount still owned the rights. Wilder liked the play. Biro worked with Lubitsch often, and in Wilder's eyes, anyone who was good enough for the master was good enough for him too. So, even though the 1939 version had performed so poorly, Paramount gave Wilder and Brackett the go-ahead to adapt it a fourth time. They just couldn't call it Hotel Imperial. And unlike the previous versions, which were set during World War I, they could bring it very much into the present.
Bear in mind, also, times were changing in Hollywood. In Mark Harris's excellent book, Five Came Back, Harris not only chronicles how John Ford, Frank Capra, William Wyler, George Stevens, and John Huston all came to enlist in the Army and document the war to help boost domestic morale and enlistment, he also chronicles Hollywood's relationship with World War II. At the start of the war, Hollywood studios hadn't been eager to engage with the conflict happening overseas. There are many reasons why. Financial reasons were one. Studios made a lot of money overseas, and they were apprehensive about taking sides. Also, American support for the war in the late 1930s, early 1940s wasn't what you'd call robust. Most Americans didn't grasp what was going on in Europe, and they didn't, at the time, see that what was happening so far away was also their problem. And so, movies that depicted the war or attempted to stir patriotism didn't really interest American audiences. But that all changed as the war grew, as the United States got more involved, and as people learned what, exactly, the Axis powers were up to.
By 1942, Hollywood was changing with the country's mood and audiences' appetites. Mrs. Miniver, William Wyler's movie that pulled no punches about the need for direct involvement in the war, was 1942's highest-grossing film. It dominated the Oscars, winning 6 categories, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, and Best Supporting Actress. It's currently ranked 40th on the AFI's list of the most inspirational movies.
When Wilder and Brackett sat down to write Five Graves to Cairo, they did so confidently. The Major and the Minor had been released to rave reviews and box office success, and in November, the Allies won their most decisive victory when they drove Irvin Rommel, the Desert Fox, out of El Alamein, turning the tide of the entire war in North Africa. Hey everyone, if you caught our announcement episode, you already know that the Filmographers are coming back for Season 2 on September 16th, and we'll be covering the legendary writer-director, Billy Wilder.
Wilder gave us Double Indemnity, Some Like It Hot, Sunset Boulevard, and many more stone-cold classics. It's going to be a fun and fascinating season.
We'll also be bringing our A game to Patreon, a platform that allows us to connect more closely with you, our listeners.
Every month, we'll release ad-free versions of our main episodes and at least one episode exclusive to Patreon. We'll study the films Wilder wrote before he became a director. We'll watch films by the filmmakers Wilder inspired, and more.
Our Patreon is the only way to get the complete Season 2 experience, so be sure to join us at patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast.
You can join for free or pay a small monthly amount. If you do support us financially, we'll reward you with fun swag, like a Filmographer's mug. Just be sure to join. Once again, you'll find us at patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. As Rommel was retreating in Africa, Wilder arrived in Yuma, Arizona, the location where he would begin shooting Five Graves to Cairo. He had the desert, he had a tank he'd borrowed from the American Army. He tried to acquire an English tank, but the cost of transporting it to the Arizona desert was too high. And he had his star, Franchot Tone. He had tried to get Cary Grant for the role, but Grant told him that Paramount didn't have enough money to get him to spend a month in the desert, which is a very Cary Grant thing to say and makes me wish I could do a credible Cary Grant impersonation. Mike, it's crazy to think that despite many close calls, Wilder and Grant would never work together on a film. It's one of the great missed opportunities in film history.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm sure we'll bring this up more because there are times where they flirt with a collaboration, many different roles, different projects, and it, for one reason or another, just never came to fruition. And they were friends. It's strange they never did. It's almost, I don't know, maybe it's just too good, too perfect. You know, it's hard to play. I think he was actually up, and we'll surely get there again, but I think he was up for Some Like It Hot, if I'm not mistaken, for the Tony Curtis role.
That sounds correct. We'll confirm or deny that when we get there. But yeah, reading ahead in Wilder's biography, Cary Grant comes up multiple times, and as you say, they seem to get along fine. But if there's a reservation that Grant had about working with Wilder, I hope we find it, or maybe it was just simply the old devil of Hollywood, which is scheduling conflicts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because as flexible and how much Wilder was able to do, Grant was equally up to any task, drama, comedy. He did it all. So it's weird given that neither one were very narrow in their abilities or appetites, and they still weren't able to cross over together. It's remarkable. Yeah, a shame. But getting back to a movie and stars that was made with real people, Five Graves to Cairo was filmed in 3 locations: Yuma, the Arizona desert, and Indio, California, where, adjacent the Salton Sea, Paramount erected a set that replicated Sidi Halfaya. Sorry, Keir, I had it. You got an answer?
I'm going with Halfaya.
Halfaya. It's funny. I looked it up and now it's like escaping my mind, so I apologize. But their set replicated that. It's the Egyptian village where the story takes place. Now, most of the action takes place in the Empress of Britain Hotel, and Wilder shot hotel interiors on various Paramount lots. Like the major and the minor, the shoot was more or less a smooth one. Five Graves to Cairo did go over its schedule by a week and was $30,000 over budget, but given the scale of the production, that's really not all that bad. There's certainly worse. Wilder had even managed to wrangle Erich von Stroheim, who was a notorious pain in the ass. We noted before that von Stroheim was once a visionary director. He'd made Greed, legendary movies, the 8-hour supposed masterpiece. We don't know because no one's seen it. It was edited to within an inch of its life by MGM producer Irving Thalberg, and the footage that was cut has unfortunately been lost to time. Now, von Stroheim was notorious still, even post-directing, for being demanding, uncompromising, and very difficult. That's why, at this point in his career, he's no longer directing movies. No one wanted to work with him. But Wilder, as we know, knows what he wants. He knows how to get it. And he knew that it would take a giant to play a giant. And thus he needed von Stroheim to play Field Marshal Rommel.
Yeah, and von Stroheim brings the presence in spades. There's a great story about Wilder's first meeting with von Stroheim much earlier. The young director had, idolized this titan of filmmaking and was naturally nervous to meet him. Wilder, who apparently once had written in a review, maybe his review of Greed back in Germany, that von Stroheim was 5 years ahead of his time. He when he met him in person, he shook von Stroheim's hand and doubled down. He told him he was always 10 years ahead of his time. Von Stroheim fixed Wilder with an icy stare and barked, 20!
And they say he's hard to work with.
He had a good sense of his own worth.
Yeah, and you have to wonder if maybe there is some playfulness in there, because they went on to work again in Sunset Boulevard, and he played and we said this in our episode on Sunset Boulevard, a kind of self-effacing role of a former director who's now, a manservant, So maybe there's some aged wisdom, self-effacing humor, some reflection, who knows, but he did say 20 right in this kid's face.
I hope that somebody has done a podcast on von Stroheim. I certainly have never read a full-length biography, but I need to. He was such an unbelievable character, known for his exacting attention to detail, even in costume, like in whether it's this film as an actor or whether as a director, he would insist on details that wouldn't even be seen on camera, just because he wanted he believed the audience could tell the difference, essentially, whether there was film in a prop camera or not. Anyway, fascinating guy.
Yeah, I mean, he demanded a very particular, in Five Graves to Cairo, a very particular set of binoculars, German binoculars, uh, that he wouldn't, shoot this scene without it. Which I can't even remember. I've watched it a few times now. I can't remember when they even used binoculars in this movie.
Yeah, I don't remember the binoculars either. But he knew. He knew.
But he knew, and that's what's important. So Five Graves to Cairo. So the story begins with J.J. Bramble, the only surviving member of a British tank crew routed by Rommel's forces, stumbling deliriously into an Egyptian dot on the map called, here we go again, Sidi Halfaya. In the partially bombed Empress of Britain Hotel, he collapses. Farid, the owner, wants to shelter him from the arriving Nazis, while Mouche, the French maid, suggests they give him up. But Bramble comes to just in time and takes on the identity of Davos, the waiter, who was killed by a Nazi bombing raid the night before. When the Nazis take over the hotel as their headquarters, their leader is none other than Rommel himself, the Desert Fox. Bramble wants to assassinate him, which puts him at odds with Mouche, who has other plans. Bramble believes Mouche wants to prostitute herself to the conquerors, but really, she wants to bargain with the only thing she has, her body, for the release of her brother who's in a concentration camp. The conflict is thus between Bramble, an ordinary man willing to make the supreme sacrifice to help the British cause, and Mouche, whose goal is purely personal. And Wilder being Wilder, even though it's only his second movie, there's a lot of murky gray area to explore, and no one is truly heroic. Bramble learns that the man he's impersonating, Davos, was actually a Nazi spy privy to a secret so important it could turn the tide for the British. So his challenge is to learn what Davos knew without revealing his own ignorance. And the title of the movie, Five Graves to Cairo, is actually both a code name and a clue. And that title was very contentious, I should note, that Paramount didn't want it, Wilder and Brackett did. They threw around a lot of titles that were far, far worse. And Five Graves to Cairo stuck, maybe not because it's the best title, and I argue it's not, but I think they just couldn't find anything better, so here we are.
It's certainly a memorable title that makes you wonder what the movie's about, and so on that level, it succeeds.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't. I wonder. It just doesn't have like catchiness because it doesn't tell you what it is. It doesn't tell you what it's about. It's a tough one. So anyway, getting back to our summary of the movie, Wilder tightens the screws as Bramble makes contact with a captured British colonel, solves the mystery, and has his cover blown when the body of the real Davos is discovered in the cellar. He kills a Nazi officer and prepares to depart for Cairo, where he can turn over his intelligence to the British. But he doesn't know until the last second whether Mouche will turn him over to the British. She protects him by taking the fall for the killing he committed, and he leaves her to take the rap, believing he's left evidence that will save her. When he returns months later with the triumphant British army, he learns that it's Mouche who's made the ultimate sacrifice. The Nazis executed her, not for her guilt, but for her contempt of them. Keir, now that we've chronicled the making of this movie and summarized its plot, tell me what you thought of it. Did you enjoy? And upon fresh new viewing, Keir, did you enjoy
Yes.
Five Graves to Cairo?
Yeah, first time viewing of this very old movie. I've now seen it 3 times, so I've made up for lost time. Because I absorb things slowly, and I often miss things on the first go around, so I got to rewatch before I can weigh in. But I was even on the very first viewing, I was pleasantly surprised. It's as with Major and the Minor, it's tempting to think that because a movie has kind of been forgotten, that it was sort of forgotten for a reason. But look, it's well written, very well executed, and it looks terrific. Mm-hmm. It hardly feels like a sophomore effort for Wilder as a director. And watching it, I was all the more surprised that I had never heard of it, because while I disagree with Quentin Tarantino, and this is not even close to my top 10 movies of all time, it's certainly good enough to be in conversation with some other really, lasting movies from World War II. I do think it has some structural problems that mark it somewhat as an early effort. The kind of thing that we won't see from Brackett and Wilder in later movies, or from Wilder and Diamond. I think my main issue is that it opens and closes with an unnecessary amount of information conveyed title cards, which kind of mutes the immediacy of the drama to some degree. Although those may be helpful for modern audiences who are less familiar with what's going on in World War II. At the time, this was, ripped from the headlines kind of stuff. I would have liked to see them write around it. So that's a quibble I've got. And
That's fair.
Even though the mystery behind the Five Graves is fun, it's kind of thin and it's hardly believable. Spoiler alert on the 72-year-old movie. in this fictional version of the North African theater of World War II, Rommel is able to advance with terrific speed because years later, he buried supply dumps in 5 locations while posing as an archaeologist. These are the 5.
That was the one. Sorry to interrupt you. That was one goofy moment when there's the reveal, like the professor, and you see the picture, and it's Rommel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they only mention it for that. It doesn't. The professor thing doesn't really fit in. So into your, the problems you have, it doesn't really fit in other than for the reveal, which you don't really need. So sorry, that was kind of
no, and agreed. And also that clue has come by relatively easily because Bramble keeps mentioning the name of the professor, and then Farid is like, "Oh, I know why you're thinking of that name." And he opens a drawer, and he's got a piece of newspaper he's used as a liner in a drawer, which is not an uncommon thing to do back then. But it happens to be the very article about the professor coming to Africa on this archaeological dig, and then we see from the picture that it is Rommel. That just feels pretty convenient. It feels like a plot twist not quite worthy of Brackett and Wilder, I would say. Yeah, and so the 5 locations are the 5 graves of the title, and the location of those dumps corresponds to the letters EGYPT on Rommel's personal map of the country, which for various reasons strains credulity, even in an 1843 film. I mean, those letters alone cover an awful lot of ground.
And I love how Rommel's also like, you see, the stupid British don't get it. And it's just like, what? How would they get it? Like, just looking at the map, he's like, it's there in plain sight. Don't you see? It's
right.
Like, dude, what?
Like, they don't get it because you're the key to your map is such a stupid idea. Like, these giant black letters stamped across a country are supposedly like the X marks the spot, but like the letter E alone would cover, 10,000 acres. I don't know. Yeah. So that's a little goofy. I will say that those didn't really hamper my enjoyment of the movie. It's more like something that I think keeps from elevating the movie, to a greater level or whatever. I thought the movie was a lot of fun. It looks amazing. You'll probably want to talk about the look of the film. I thought French O'Tone was a solid leading man. He's generally likable. I'll probably have something more to say about him later on. I thought Anne Baxter's acting was terrific.
Yeah.
But sadly, her French accent was not. I don't know how you could say that, but like I kind of feel that way. Like physically, and her face and like her presence, everything I thought was really well done. Her French accent was like, I don't know, it was like almost Monty Python level or something. Von Stroheim delivers an absolutely commanding performance as Rommel, exuding both authority and intelligence, as well as the vanity that, in the movie at least, is his undoing. So all in all, liked it a lot. Thought it was a very good film, not a great or classic film per se. Mike, what did you think?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And those are all good thoughts. You know what I like? I'll say, because I do want to talk about the look of the movie, but you know what I really liked, and I wonder your thoughts about this. I really like war movies that are like small, and I can see how, and I don't know if maybe Tarantino released this list when he was promoting Inglourious Bastards, which might actually be the case. But I do see a lot of Inglourious Bastards. I see a lot of this in Inglourious Bastards in the sense that it's like this, at least through parts of it, it gets very bombastic and pretty wild at the end of Inglourious Bastards. Sure. I'm not going to spoil it, but it gets, if you haven't seen it, you should see it just for the ending because it's nuts. But there's these small missions throughout, these like minor things. It's not Saving Private Ryan where it's storming the beach in Normandy. This is just a small kind of chapter, even, smaller than that within the war. And I kind of like small scale war pictures. And this really checks that box. I don't know if you have the same sentiment towards war, if you like the big theater of war, so to speak.
Now, you make an excellent point. And when I, give writing workshops and speak about writing, I'm always talking about, finding human conflict even in big stories. And, I think rookie writers who want big conflict often default to really truly big conflicts like war or whatever, or maybe somebody's writing a science fiction novel and then they decide to have an intergalactic war or something like that, and that's fine. But you've got to have the human story. I mean, Star Wars nails that, in a way that's obviously made it one of the most influential movies of all time, because people relate to the very small human drama of this farm boy who wants to go to space and be involved in something that's bigger than he is. So even if you're telling a story with this great big canvas, you've got to find the small story. But like you, I also I appreciate a war movie that doesn't bother to go too big. I mean, this movie does step outside of that hotel at times, but it's almost like newsreel footage. And it's mostly at the beginning and the end where you get this sense of the troops, and it almost could be like B-roll or something, because it's the real drama, and it shows its roots as a play.
Definitely,
the real drama is something that could have been told on the stage of theater, which is because it was. And so I think that's what makes it so effective, because it is an actor's movie.
Yeah.
And I agree. Like, I don't mind sometimes a big war epic, but and someday we're going to do our counterpoint on Steven Spielberg. But I'm not the biggest fan of Saving Private Ryan, in fact, because it feels like he's so determined to blow you away with this, like the best battle sequence ever, that he throws the kitchen sink into this before he gets to some human drama. And to me, I'm just not as moved by a movie like that.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I think we'd be on similar pages. I think so. But it's funny you bring up the play version of it, because, like we said, that's where this started. And even though it was remade into movies, how countless times, apparently, couldn't get enough.
They're making it again as we speak.
They must be. Paramount still has the rights, or Skydance now, whoever the hell. But it's interesting, despite its roots of being a play, the movie looks great, and it's I don't say frustrating, but it's a point of contention to me that Wilder doesn't get as much credit as he deserves as having visual flourishes as a director, and even he would tell you he's a minimalist director, and in a way he is. He's never too ostentatious, and granted, also ostentatious at that time is quite, the goalposts are quite different now than they were then, but the movie looks fantastic. The movie looks absolutely fantastic. Wilder undersells himself as a director. I think people take his visuals for granted a little bit. He gets more credit, I feel like, for a screenwriter than he does as a director, even though he's really marvelous. His use of shadow, of light and dark in this movie in particular, and we'll talk about this more next week with Double Indemnity, is absolutely fantastic. It is beautiful, and he only gets better at it. He's doing tons of interesting things with the camera. The shot when Bramble has stumbled into a hotel in the beginning, and he's sort of having a heat stroke, and they stash him away, and he's looking at the Nazis through the lattice work of the desk, is a really cool flourish. It's not huge, but it's really neat in the way he's framing the colonel and the hotel owner is really, really great. That's a great little moment. The way he introduces Rommel, he's seeing from above, you're looking down at him, you're just getting the back of his head, this powerful bald head and the bulging neck, and he's focusing just on that. And he's even speaking in German at this point, so you don't even know what he's saying, but you absolutely know who he is, and you see the power he commands. And that's all a testament to how sharp visually Wilder is. And I thought, just there's many moments like that. The moment in the tunnel, there's lots of scenes that you can point to where Wilder is really, really doing an exceptional job telling this story visually beyond how strong the script is.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the cinematographer on this is John Seitz, who Wilder would go on to work with multiple times in the future, including Sunset Boulevard, which is another movie with some very striking cinematography. And I just could not agree more. It is a great looking film. And I think that's one of the things that helps win me over, despite some of my reservations about the structure. There's so many good shots. It's kind of hard to call out too many. You called out several great ones. I would say that one that I absolutely love is, and this is kind of a bravura shot, because Wilder would often talk about how he doesn't like to call attention to the camera work, but once in a while he does. And there's a chase scene when Bramble's true identity is discovered. He of course is posing as Davos, the waiter. That a Nazi officer discovers the body of the real Davos in the cellar where it's been lying the whole time undiscovered. So the Nazi finds it, realizes that Bramble is not their spy. A chase ensues. It's a pretty great sequence. Again, wonderfully shot, and it culminates in a killing. Bramble kills the Nazi, but the way it is portrayed is basically like we can't see what happens because a flashlight falls to the ground and is shining into the camera. And so we hear the shot. We don't know who's dead. I mean, nice kind of suspense technique too. I mean, most modern viewers will understand that the good guy kills the bad guy, but it's kind of a bravura moment, and it looks great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's another moment. Like I said, there's many you can point to that are really, really strong and visually interesting. Like he's just doing some cool stuff. Despite we did pick at the plot a little bit, but there are some really cool complications. And this is some of the interesting things that you can do when you're going small. You can ratchet up this tension in just these little ways. Obviously we said Rommel shows up, which adds a really big complication, and it's really interesting to have this larger than life real life character pop up into the movie. That's really cool. Then you have Moosh's motivations they get better and more interesting every time I watch it. And I'm talking about her in a minute, but like her motivations add some interesting wrinkles. The British POWs arriving, and they know the real Davos. Like there's these constant, like what any good movie should do, but what a small scale confined movie should do. It's basically more or less a single location movie. Like Keir said, you have the intro where he goes to the desert, and once he lands at the hotel, we're in the hotel for the duration. The ending where you have the tank battles, it feels like more or less B-roll. You're not really getting anything specific happening, just some tanks firing at each other.
Men marching, tanks rolling. Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. That's it. But like just there's layers and there's complications, and it makes the film really unique, because that's what you must do at small scale, is that you have to find creative ways to create and sustain tension. And it does it really, really well. Like any Wilder bracket joint, it has really good comedic flourishes. The hotel owner, the dopey Italian general with I found hilarious, like these wannabe fascists that the British don't like, the Germans don't like nobody likes these guys. But it doesn't do too much, it doesn't like make it into a pure comedy. It just gives enough to like some breathing room from the tension. And it also helps us invest deeper into the characters and just into the overall scenario of this strange hotel, like this British hotel in Egypt that's being occupied by the Nazis. Like it's a lot going on, but I think adding those just a little bit of lightness to it makes it a little bit more digestible and a little bit more enjoyable. So there's a lot of good elements in this movie.
Yeah, the comic moments are so important. Agree. It's not a comedy, it's a drama, but it's got drama doesn't have to be all one thing, and the comic touches are great. Akeem Tamaroff as Farid and Fortunio Bonanova as General Sebastiano are definitely written to play into cultural stereotypes of the time, but I would argue that Tamaroff, who is a Russian-born Armenian playing an Egyptian, transcends the limitations of his role. He was an extremely versatile actor in throughout his career. He has great comic timing and real warmth. And Bonanova, a Spaniard playing an Italian, is broader for sure. I'm sure some people may hate his performance. I agree with you. I thought it was still funny as the long-suffering Italian general who's treated as a second-class citizen by the German field marshal, which, as I understand, more or less echoes the reality.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, so that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it was very broad, but it was, I don't know, it was goofy. I kind of enjoyed it.
And fun fact, Bonanova was an opera singer in real life, and he also plays the opera coach in Citizen Kane.
Really? I did not know that.
Who's coaching and coaxing, although he's more berating, the character of Kane's wife. Is her name Susan Alexander? I might be wrong. As she's obviously not up to the task, and he's just beyond exasperated with her inability to sing. So interesting guy.
That is interesting. Wow. Way to do that homework. Way to dig a little deeper there. Or did you just know that?
Did the homework.
Okay. I was like, damn, that's impressive.
Wish I knew that off the top of my head.
No, that would be pretty remarkable. You need Ben Mankiewicz next to you, not me. The one thing I will say, you had some nitpicks that I agree with. The one thing that I can confidently say I didn't enjoy, I mentioned getting back to Mooch, and I'm going to do it now. I did like her role. I liked her character. I liked the performance. The French accent was kind of goofy, but whatever. It's like we've illustrated, you have all these different, people from all over the world playing all these different, like you're Italian and you're this, you're that. It's like, that just kind of comes with the territory. So I liked her character. I liked her performance, but what I didn't like is the resolution to her story. I don't know. That always doesn't sit well with me. I'm always disappointed by it because I feel like she got kind of a raw deal in general. And two, what I think really kind of just sticks you in the side a little bit by the end is that like the speech that Bramble delivers at her grave is kind of cringeworthy. You can tell Wilder and Brackett are trying to capture that, Minervian spirit, but it falls flat. It's this weird, like Tom Joad, when you hear the ground shake, that'll be us. It's just like,
yeah,
it just feels forced. It feels unearned. It's not delivered that well. So it didn't give justice to a character that I really enjoyed. I thought deserved a lot better. That was one thing that was really unfortunate. Just that last button at the end was, and then like he literally runs away. He's at the grave giving this heartfelt speech, and he gives her the parasol, and then like somebody calls him, and he like just fucking takes off. Like he doesn't even look back. And I'm just like, oh, okay, well, guess we're done. Like.
Yeah. The graveside speech reminds me of the tacked on patriotic appeal at the end of The Major and the Minor. And those feel like relics of the time. I'm sure they played great to audiences at the time, but they are the most dated elements of both films now. And I agree that Moosh's character deserves more. It took me a couple of viewings to really grasp the complexities of both Bramble and Moosh, but there's kind of more bubbling beneath the surface than meets the eye. There are big moral issues being discussed here, but Wilder doesn't put his thumb on the scale, although he does at the end suggest that Moosh is the real hero because he has Farid deliver this line. I think this is the line. I put her with the other soldiers, meaning he buried her with the other soldiers.
Which is nice. And he handled that well. And that again, like you point out, that actor did a really, really good job. So we both liked it. I think it's safe to say, thumbs up from you, Keir?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, solid thumbs up from both of us. Maybe not our favorite, but a solid thumbs up. And we are not the only ones who enjoyed this movie. It was also a box office success. And the timing on this is crazy because the movie was released in May of 1943, a mere 2 weeks after the Germans surrendered in North Africa. Weird. Maybe the audience thought they were watching a 96-minute newsreel. It feels like it. But they liked it, and they liked it a lot. It wasn't, I don't know if you can call it a smash hit, but on a budget of $855,000, that includes the 30 that Wilder was over. So it was budgeted 825, came in at 855. It made $1.65 million. Not bad.
Yeah, as we've said, these days that wouldn't be a great return because they spend so much money to market films. But I think back then that was a pretty solid return.
Mm-hmm.
It was also a hit with critics. The movie currently holds a 100% score on Rotten Tomatoes, which was obviously a huge deal in 1943. At the time, Variety admired how Wilder handled, quote, the varied story elements, countless suspenseful moments, and vivid portrayals, end quote. Writing more recently in the Chicago Reader, David Keir called it a crisp spy thriller. It was also nominated for 3 Academy Awards for editing, art direction, and cinematography. Definitely 3 strengths of the movie, although it lost out to a movie called Air Force for editing and The Song of Bernadette for art direction and cinematography. So despite doing well financially at the time, doing well critically, Academy Award nominations, the movie is more or less forgotten.
It is. And I'm wondering, Keir, and look, it's not alone. There's plenty There's plenty of Academy Award winners that are like lost to time. This is not
like Air Force, which I just mentioned.
Yeah, what is that? There are plenty of movies that have been lost to time. Some literally they're just gone. So not super uncommon, but this one kind of stands out a little bit because it's Wilder. Because Wilder and Brackett, that's a big deal. So I'm wondering, Keir, do you have theories? Do you have conspiracy or otherwise? Why is Five Graves to Cairo more or less forgotten?
I do have theories. I wish they were conspiracy theories because that would be so much juicier and we'd probably, get a lot more attention for this podcast. I think, I think part of it might be, as I said, like the structural stuff that I talked about earlier. It's like, just that kept it from being like an A+ movie and made it more of an A- movie or a B+ or something like that. But I also think, look, Tone and Baxter are not Bogey and Bergman. Casablanca, another war movie set in a hotel in North Africa, beat Five Graves by a year and will outlast it forever. In fact, a lot of people were making more war movies at the time, but I wonder if Five Graves might be seen by some as an attempt to cash in on Casablanca a bit. While Tone plays an everyman who thinks on his feet, he plays it earnestly and fairly winningly. I just don't think he has the depth as an actor to portray the darker side of his character, which is that he's willing to leave behind a woman he's quite attracted to in order to be the hero himself. I mean, yes, his character makes arguments in the movie about sacrifice for the greater good, but I don't think as an actor, Tone really makes us feel that battle in himself. He comes across as very two-dimensional. And Tone and Baxter just don't have the kind of chemistry that's going to make a movie immortal. Bogey and Bergman, Bogey and Bacall, Tracy and Hepburn, whatever. They don't connect in that way. Yeah. And even more than that, I think that although Five Graves is terrifically paced and has a solid mystery at its heart, the character development is just not complex. Using Casablanca as an example again, Rick undergoes a fundamental character transformation from being more or less amoral and self-interested to someone who's willing to act against his own self-interest for both love and maybe ideals. Bramble is much more straightforward. I would argue he kind of leaves the movie more or less as he enters it. Moosh is probably the Rick of this movie because she transforms from being willing to sacrifice herself for her brother to sacrificing herself for Bramble and the British Army. But unfortunately, the movie sidelines her and she dies off screen. And also, Casablanca is often held up as an example of like a perfect screenplay. And this one just isn't quite at that level, no matter how much we love Brackett and Wilder.
Yeah, I mean, those are wonderful points. Hard to deny any of them. Not that I would want to, but those are all really, really strong points. The star power is huge. Not as sharp as a movie like Casablanca. And there's also just the glut of World War II movies. I mean, you look through again, going just to Air Force, just a brief glimpse into like the annals of World War II movies, and there's a lot of them, so like, I mean, Hollywood was cranking them through this period, this middle period, through the end of the war, through the 40s, through the 50s. I mean, even till today there are, but even going to that, let's say 10-year stretch from like 41 to 51, there are lots of World War II movies. So it has that working against it. To stand amongst that pack is tough. But also whittling it down, you look at just Wilder's movies, they can't all be remembered. And I can't think of any director whose every single effort, every single output is looked at and examined and cherished comprehensively, except for like Night of the Hunter. That's that's about it.
That's how you do it.
You do one and done. But it's also probably in his own catalog, it's probably one of the weaker ones, even within his own range. So you have that as well. And it's before, you start really recognizing Wilder once he has a breakout movie, and he hasn't had a breakout movie yet. So it's hard to pick it out of all the World War II movies, hard to pick it out even Wilder's catalog. Star power, there's a lot of things going against it. It's a solid, I think you used this term last episode, it's just a solid double of a movie, and that's okay. But it's hard for a solid double of a movie to last and be remembered and discussed and, preserved for 50, 60, 70 years.
Yeah, excellent points. Definitely a glut of World War II movies. And, speaking of movies by great directors that are forgotten, I just looked up Air Force while we were talking, and that is a Howard Hawks picture starring John Garfield. Now, of course, Hawks directed like 100 movies or something compared to Wilder's 24. But yeah, it's a Howard Hawks film. I'd never heard of it. So they're just not all going to make it. They're not all going to be classics. And, I do think that over the course of the season, we're going to be helping people remember exactly how many bangers Wilder did film. When you were pitching Wilder, I remember you were the one who first suggested we consider Wilder very strongly for this season. And, you said like, his hit, he made bangers. Like his hit to miss ratio is unparalleled. And it's certainly true that of the 24 films he made, yeah, there are a few that we've forgotten, a few that aren't well remembered. There are several that you cannot watch easily today because they're not even available anywhere. But he also made a handful of films that are considered the best of all time, and that's a record anybody would like to have.
Yeah, and if you're watching or listening to this, I think it's you may not have seen this movie, you probably haven't. I'm going to go on a limb. If you have, great. I had, good for you. We're all cinephiles here. But once, and you may know this as well, but once Wilder gets going, like, man, he gets going. And that's gonna be the next episode. Like
our very next episode, third movie, he makes an all-timer.
Yeah, and never looks back. He doesn't look back for a while.
Cannot wait for that. Speaking of, Wilder films that are not necessarily easy to find and watch, Five Graves To Cairo is not streaming anywhere, though there is a version of it on YouTube, which you did not hear from us, but it's not streaming anywhere, legit. You can find it on Blu-ray. Kino Lorber released a 4K master of the movie, and it looks pretty good. Its only special feature worth noting, unfortunately, is a commentary track. We've already referred to that by film historian Joseph McBride. So I wish it had more extras, but look, it's a $15 DVD, and that's well worth the price. Yeah. And while the film may not be remembered by most, it does have an important place in film history, and it may even have had a lasting impact thanks to its appreciation by directors like Tarantino.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, that is exactly how I got turned on to the movie, was through Tarantino. And we're not alone. In the book Conversations with Wilder, Cameron Crowe cited the movie as being a direct inspiration on Indiana Jones. I can see it, particularly its blend of the action adventure genre, and most particularly in both films' iconic opening sequences. Brackett, Crowe noted, said that Cairo hadn't aged well, But I'm telling you, Crow tells Wilder, it feels like an Indiana Jones level action adventure.
I mean, maybe even in the character of Fareed, who feels like a kind of slightly smaller version of Indy's buddy Sala. I do think Crow's overstating it a bit, given that most of the action in this movie takes place in a hotel. But, sure, there could be some Five Graves DNA in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And since you mentioned the opening sequence, maybe we're doing this backwards since we're nearing the end of this episode, but we have got to talk about the film's iconic opening. As the titles roll, superimposed over a background of sand dunes, we see a tank rolling slowly toward us. As it gets closer, we see a dead man hanging out of the turret. Cut to the inside where the driver has died with his foot on the gas pedal, and the rest of the crew seems dead as well. Then one of them falls forward and rouses himself. It's J.J. Bramble, who nearly dies from the exhaust filling the compartment before he can climb to safety. The ghost tank, piloted by a dead man, is both an unforgettable cinematic sequence and a powerful visual metaphor for the cruelty of mechanized warfare. The war machine will roll on without us.
Is phenomenal, and it just also proved the thing that I was struck by it was that he was like fully formed, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't like Billy Wilder. It was like it wasn't like he kind of figured stuff out as he was going along, and that was kind of what I was expecting was kind of like a interesting kind of but maybe clunky movie or whatever, and it was like no, this is like one of the greats, you know, which tend to be the thing with those guys that were writers and then directors like John Huston and Preston, like all when they came out of the gate as directors.
They really knew how to form a film, though, as writers, you know, how to make it really work and what worked and what didn't. And of course, Billy Wilder goes back to movies like Nanotchka and others where he worked on the script. So,
the Lubitsch stuff.
So he knew what he was doing. But this, I think, was only his second film.
Yeah.
You know?
And
Major and the Minor beforehand that he directed, and then this one.
And what I was enjoyed about it so much was just how economic it was, how it just like gets right into the action, which you'll see. Billy Wilder knows how to open a movie.
Yes.
Like he knows
and close a movie.
And close a movie. Oh my gosh. You will see the ending of this movie will knock you out.
Yeah.
But it's great.
Mike, in our biographical episode about Billy Wilder, which is where I strongly suggest listeners start the season, I said that although Wilder's own life was very much affected by the Nazis, he fled Europe and he went to his grave believing his mother had been gassed in Auschwitz, that he had never really made a definitive film about Jewishness and the rise of the Nazis, which I still believe is largely true, but the picture may be more nuanced. In his commentary on Five Graves to Cairo, film historian Joseph McBride calls out a number of elements he believes were very personal for Wilder. He suggests the tank crew being asphyxiated by a blocked exhaust pipe could be read as an Auschwitz gas chamber. He notes that the waiter's name is Davos, which is where, in one story, Wilder was skiing when he learned about the Reichstag fire, a signal it was time to leave Germany.
Interesting.
Okay. Isn't that interesting? I totally missed it, even though we did a ton of research and I knew the Davos story. It just never even occurred to me that the character's name had anything to do with that.
No, I forgot about that too. I remember the story. I think we mentioned the story.
We did.
I don't remember that. I didn't put together that connection. Is there more?
And that seems quite intentional.
Yeah, it has to. I mean, I don't know. I wonder if some is subconscious. I don't know. But go on. I think you have some more, right? There's some more connections.
Yeah. So he also points out that the word mouche means fly in French, which, that's the nickname given to the character of the maid. And the suggestion is that character could be symbolic of Jews who were often described as vermin by the Nazis. Okay. And Rommel carries a fly swatter.
Oh, that's right. Wow. Okay. Yeah. And he hits Moosh with it.
And he strikes Moosh with it. Yes.
Yeah.
And furthermore, like the Rommel character, Wilder himself often carried canes or swagger sticks. And one person did a psychological reading of Wilder that goes back to his mother beating him with a stick, and that he subconsciously needed a stick in his hand to survive, almost like, to have a weapon at hand. McBride even believes that Bramble's abandonment of Moosh stands in for Wilder's own feeling that he abandoned his mother. He didn't really abandon her, of course. He went back home and tried to convince her to leave Nazi Germany, but she stayed, and then in the end she perished. But that was something he felt lifelong guilt about that. And so again, if you're getting psychological, you might read something into that. Now, I don't typically go in for the full couch psychoanalysis of directors. I generally prefer to read the film as a film, but I like to know the stuff. And Wilder was very guarded when it came to personal matters. So it's also, we don't have his take on a lot of this stuff. This is film critics digging deep into the text. But this is interesting stuff. And given the traumas Wilder endured before coming to Hollywood, I'm interested to see how often these themes recur in his later films and how intentional they seem. Because, these 4 examples I cited, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that all 4 of them were intentional, but a lot of times, artists put things in their work subconsciously. It feels like a stretch to me that the tank crew being asphyxiated by exhaust is an intentional nod to a death camp, but maybe.
Yeah, it could be. All these things, I'm always at odds, I'll be honest. I don't know how you feel like when you see, and this is why I probably couldn't do critical writing, because I don't know if you had this with your work, even in a simple review where people say well, this is, I'm going to give a superficial example, and not even a clear example, but this thing that, this writer, me or you, or reading about others is doing is clearly a representative of this. And I've thought about it with my own work, and I was like, no, at least I wasn't aware of it. And you don't want, you could never say, look, somebody's reading of the text is they're reading of the text, and if they're drawing these connections, hey, like you said, there's always subconsciousness. But I think here's the thing that I think that people who do critical work like this, and it's valuable and it's fascinating and I enjoy it, but I think they, how do I say it? I think that their expectations of how much an artist is in control of their work is much higher than an artist's actual execution. I think that they think an artist is thinking about all these moments and they're like, yes, this represents this, and yes, this moment represents that, and I'm dealing with this thing here, that we're fully in control and aware, not even control, but aware of all this stuff that they're reading into this hyper textual reading that, again, maybe subconsciously, maybe some of it, but I've never felt that in control. And I've read stuff for artists where they're like, I don't know, maybe, so it's interesting. And I think this stuff naturally comes out of artists, but I think that the expectation, the idea that we're so fully aware of our own, it's like anybody else. How aware are we of our own neuroses and hangups and traumas and this and that? Not always, and certainly not very. So it's hard for them to be aware of it and then to find a way to convey it artistically. That's a lot going on to expect and to do.
Yeah, I broadly agree with you. I do think that, certainly with my own work, which is not I wouldn't describe my novels as generally being, literary and artistic. They're more entertainments. But even within that, I know I have recurring themes and stuff that I didn't think about. They just show up because it's something that's, I have preoccupations or whatever. So I think looking for the hidden hand of the director is less productive than thinking about what things that director might unconsciously be expressing. And actually, one of the things that McBride points out that was most convincing to me or most interesting to me was the appearance of what will become a well-known recurring theme for Wilder, which is play acting. That in order to survive, the lead in Five Graves has to pretend to be somebody else. And McBride says to be in exile is a form of masquerade, and that exiles sometimes play the fool to survive. And obviously, we know Wilder is famously an exile. Disguise and dissembling are certainly something we'll see a lot more from this exile director,
Yes.
along with hotels and trains.
Wow. That's some pretty powerful stuff. Yeah, I buy it. I see it. I mean, that's something that Wilder does wrestle with a lot. And we'll get to him returning to Europe later on in his life, which is very fascinating. What he was there to do and what he experienced while he was there. This is after the war. So you can see these things bubbling up in his life. And it's interesting because we talked about this before the show. People accuse Wilder of not being a personal director. And I think we would agree. I don't think he is a very personal director, but I do think that you can find it. And I think McBride makes a very compelling case that if you look, you will find.
In this film, they were very practical. You know, they were making a Hollywood war movie that didn't seem overtly personal, but it's covertly personal. It satisfies the audience need for heroics and some action. There's not much action for a war film. I mean, there's a little tank warfare at the beginning and the end, but not much. So it's mostly a character study in a hotel, a claustrophobic setting. And that's one element that is very much Billy Wilder. He grew up in hotels. His father had a chain of restaurants, cafes, and train stations. And so the family would be constantly traveling in trains and living in hotels. And so you see trains in a lot of Wilder films in hotels. For example, Some Like It Hot, you know, a lot of it takes place in a hotel. But even before that, in some of their films, some of the films that he wrote, such as Ninotchka, Hold Back the Dawn, Bluebeard's Eighth Wife, Rise My Love, a lot of them take place in hotels. And then later, Irma la Douce, Avanti, Fedora, his last film, Buddy Buddy. Even a film like Stalag 17, another World War II film he made, is a prison camp, which is not exactly a hotel, but it has some similarities. But even the homes in some Wilder films have kind of hotel-like feeling, like Norma Desmond's mansion at Sunset Boulevard. The characters in his films are kind of in transit all the time. They're kind of restless and moving like he was. And they don't seem to have a fixed place, you know, and that's, I think, characteristic of hotel life. Anything can happen and disparate people can come together. So it's very congenial to have this setting and suspenseful. It's somewhat Hitchcockian. Wilder admired Hitchcock. There's a lot of suspense in this film. And now here is a scene with Stroheim.
It's that time again, Keir, time for the Filmographers Five. Now, Five Graves to Cairo is obviously a World War II movie, and it would be easy to do a list of our favorite World War II movies. Although actually maybe it wouldn't be easy because there is a million World War II movies. So it would be probably pretty hard. Regardless, we're going to save a World War II list for a different Wilder movie. Today, we're going to go in a different direction. Our top 5 movies based on plays. Though we're not including anything by Shakespeare because that would make the entire thing too laborious. So, no Shakespeare, 5 plays. Keir, what is your number 5 movie based on a play?
And no Shakespeare because we don't want to give Miramax that much attention. Okay, our 5th favorite movie based on a play is Sleuth, the final film from the great Joseph L. Mankiewicz, and one of the few he directed after making Cleopatra, which pretty much ruined his career and damn near killed him. Based on Anthony Schaefer's Tony Award-winning play, Sleuth is a terrific cat-and-mouse thriller with remarkable performances from Laurence Olivier and Michael Caine, both of whom were nominated for Academy Awards. It was remade in 2007 and, interestingly, had Caine playing the Olivier part, while Jude Law stepped into Caine's original part. But this is one of those cases where it's best to just watch the original, which is superior in every way.
Our 4th favorite movie based on a play is Noises Off, a 1992 screwball comedy directed by my favorite, the great Peter Bogdanovich. The movie, based on Michael Frayn's play, is a hilarious romp about the production of a play, and it features a great cast, including Carol Burnett, Mary Lou Henner, Michael Caine again, John Ritter, and Christopher Reeve. The way it stages a play within a play, the many confusions and complications within the cast, the recurring bits, it's absolutely wonderful. It's a bit lost to time. The movie was released during what some consider to be Bogdanovich's fallow period, but it's thoroughly him in all the right ways, and that makes it a movie worth seeking out if you haven't seen it already.
Our third favorite movie based on a play is A Few Good Men, written by Aaron Sorkin and based on the play by Aaron Sorkin. Everyone, of course, knows this movie for Jack Nicholson's iconic "You Can't Handle the Truth," but this movie, directed by Rob Reiner, is a textbook example of how they don't make them like they used to. A competent drama with terrific performances by Nicholson, Tom Cruise, Demi Moore, and even Kevin Pollak in a rare dramatic turn. A Few Good Men is simply a solid Hollywood flick that's well shot, well acted, well written. The Sorkin script is as Sorkin-y as you'd imagine, and it engages with its audience intelligently.
Our second favorite movie based on a play is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, the brilliant adaptation of Edward Albee's play by the legendary Mike Nichols. We're brought back to Cleopatra and the Taylor Burton tandem once again, as Woolf is the third movie that the power couple starred in a year after their historical epic. And it's safe to say the honeymoon was definitely over. You are watching these actors work out their actual shit on camera, and it's pretty remarkable. That drama aside, Woolf is not just a great movie, it's one of the best movies ever made, if only for Nichols' blocking, which is a master class in staging actors. The tension he creates, combined with Ernest Lehman's pristine script and those powerhouse performances, propel Woolf into all-timer status.
And our favorite movie based on a play is A Streetcar Named Desire. How can it not be? It is the iconic stage play turned movie. Written by Tennessee Williams and directed by the blacklist turncoat Elia Kazan, Streetcar is probably best known for Marlon Brando's larger-than-life performance, one that will be remembered, studied, and admired for generations to come. Amazing to think, at the time, he was still an unknown actor, although this movie changed all that. He was nominated for a Best Actor Oscar, while Vivien Leigh won her second Best Actress trophy. The movie was nominated for Best Picture, but lost to An American in Paris. People loved their musicals in 1952. It's considered one of the great movies of all time, and as far as the filmographers are concerned, absolutely deserves that distinction.
Hey, Stella!
Keir, my favorite place to record the Filmographers podcast is in your studio in the Fine Arts Building, which is a place that you know a lot about.
I guess you could say I wrote the book on the subject. It's called Chicago's Fine Arts Building, Music, Magic, and Murder.
Whoa, murder?
Hey, artists have a lot of sharp objects lying around. And yes, while I do explore some of the darker things that have happened in this historic building, I focus more on its fascinating history and famous tenants, past and present.
I think my favorite story was about the Fine Arts Building's connection to Citizen Kane. I also love, and no offense, Keir, all the pretty pictures.
None taken, Mike. It's a beautiful hardcover book loaded with stunning photographs and archival images that looks great on your coffee table, or the coffee table of any arts lover in your family.
Listeners, you can order signed, personalized copies of Chicago's Fine Arts Building, Music, Magic, and Murder from our favorite bookstore, Exile and Bookville, located in the Fine Arts Building at 410 South Michigan Avenue. Or find them online at exileandbookville.com. Just use the notes field to tell them how Keir should inscribe it.
It's also available from the publisher at trope.com and wherever books are sold.
And that's it for this episode of the Filmographers Podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on our season-long exploration of the films of Billy Wilder. Please, 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 please take the time to join our Patreon community or leave us a review or rating on your podcasting platform of choice. Know someone who would like the show? Send them a link right now. Send it to them. Just any Filmographers Podcast, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever. Send it to them. Tell them to check us out.
Subject line, I think you will like this podcast, if you need an idea. And please email us at thefilmographerspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you, as always, to our fantastic producer, Kevin Lau, and to our pinch-hitting producer, our good friend, Luke Boyce. Thanks, Luke. As always, our theme music was composed and played by Gompson, and our logo and merch is designed by Cosmo Graff.
We'll be back in 2 weeks to examine Wilder's third film, his breakout film, the first of his many big films, maybe Keir, his best film?
It depends on whether you like your eggs sunny side up or hard boiled, Mike. But we'll find that out and more when we discuss Billy Wilder's Double Indemnity.